What's up everyone, Nader here. In this video, I'd like to go through a bunch of exercises together to learn a little bit more about the querySelector API together in JavaScript. We looked at this in the previous video where we went over all the different ways we can use querySelector and how it relates to some of the other DOM selection techniques. In this video, we're just going to get a bit more practice with how that works with progressively more challenging examples and exercises that I've put together for us to learn this in depth. Let's get right into the exercises. Okay, so as with the other videos, I have a bunch of comments here. These are all JavaScript files because eventually we're going to be writing a lot of JavaScript together. But I have these up on my GitHub if you'd like to download those. But you can also just kind of pause the video and read these. We're actually going to be doing most of our work in the actual dev tools anyway, so it's not the biggest deal if you don't have the code in front of you, because we're not actually going to be copying code from these files. So I have some warm-ups here. I'm going to kind of go through a preamble, and then I'm going to give you a chance to try this out yourself. And then maybe you can unpause the video and take a look at the solution that we come up together just for a bit more explanation as well. So to start with the warm-up, I'd like you to go to google.com in your browser. I want you to use the querySelector API that we learned in your DevTools to select the Google image logo. So that's the one right in the middle, right above the search box. Sometimes it has different kind of doodles going on with it, but you should be able to select it regardless of if it has a doodle or not, using a specific selector syntax. And then I'd like you to think, what is a CSS selector that might make the most sense to actually be able to reliably and consistently select this logo in the future? All right, and this is going to become very important once we get to topics later on, such as web scraping, because we want something that's stable and is probably not going to change. So I'll let you try that out, and then we'll go through this together. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my web browser here. Lo and behold, I have Google open. It turns out it's Chinese New Year, so I think we have our 2023 Lunar New Year rabbit, Year of the Rabbit. So for those of you that celebrate, happy Lunar New Year. But I'm going to open up my DevTools here. And then we'll have my Elements tab. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit here just so that it's a bit easier to see for all of you. I'm going to switch over to the console. Okay, a whole bunch of errors here. I'm going to clear that out, and then it's all clear. So our goal is to select this image, right? So I'm waving my mouse around. Hopefully you can kind of see that, right? This image right here. So I'm going to use this selection tool right here. I'm going to click on this image, and it's going to pop it open for me in the Elements tab. So it looks like if I highlight over this, as you see, right, I actually get the image selected in the DOM, which is fantastic. And what we want to do is try to figure out what are some kind of traits of this tag that we might be able to use to be able to select it from all the other tags in this entire document, because there's quite a few other tags in this document that might make things a little bit confusing. So let me show you what I mean. So to start, what we can see is that this is an image tag. Okay, so what we can try is we can say, okay, like this looks like it's probably the only image on the page, right? Let's just try to grab the image directly using just an image tag in querySelector. So I'm going to go back to my console here, and I'm going to do a document.querySelector, and I'm going to say, just give me an OMG, an IMG, and I'm going to press enter. And look at that, that actually works pretty well, right? So this is technically one possible solution, right? So in this case, I'm grabbing this image tag just directly by asking for the first image tag that appears on the page. All right, so that seems to actually grab the right thing. Now, I'd like you to think, is this the best approach? Okay, so hopefully you're probably thinking about this and you're like, okay, well, what if there are other image tags on the page? What if maybe one day they change their web page and the image tag that is first is different? Right? So that might break whatever code that we've written if we're always assuming that this is the logo. So we probably want to get a little bit more specific with this. So let's take a look at this image tag in a bit more detail and see if there's something in here that might make it a bit more kind of bulletproof, something that even if things change on the web page, it's a little bit more stable. All right. Now, one thing that you can notice is there's a whole bunch of attributes in here. We're going to get into attributes in future videos, but these are all these things that are something equals something, or just kind of little, they can also have no value, as we saw in the previous video. But most of these are key value pairs. So we have like the class right here, right? So if I copy this class right here and I do copy, where is it? Copy, and I do document.querySelector, and I try to grab this class name, what we'll see is that also works the same, right? So if I try to grab the class name right here, every time I hover over this, it pops up the little image preview. But you can see that if I try this selector, that seems to work. Now, what's really interesting is that this looks really specific and looks like exactly what we want. However, there is some caveats with this, you know? Maybe this thing that's being generated for this class might change, because generally when you see kind of jumbles of letters and numbers like this for class names, that usually means it's being generated by like a framework or some kind of tool behind the scenes. So every time they update their page or update their code to push a new version, there's a chance that this might change. Not always true, but very, very likely. Okay, so that might not always be the best option, because this doesn't look like something a human probably wrote. It could be. Maybe they're just very brief in their classes. But I'm going to probably bet that this is something that's generated by some kind of framework. All right. So the next thing is, well, okay, maybe there's an alt tag here, right? And the alt tag is for screen readers, usually to help describe the image to people using screen readers and navigating to web pages. So it's great that they have this. And it says Lunar New Year 2023. So, you know, this would be good, but then the problem is that this would probably only work while this particular picture is up for the Lunar New Year, right? When they take this down and it goes back to their regular Google logo, it's probably going to be a different alt tag. So that's going to change. So probably not the best choice. Height equals 200. Maybe a good choice, but this might change, you know, maybe there's different, depending screen size, right? Mobile and things like that, that might change. Source, again, this is the Lunar New Year source. You can see that the preview is right here, right? So that's going to change. So we can't really choose that. Title, Lunar New Year, probably not the greatest as well. It keeps popping up. Width, same thing as height. ID, okay. Now here we're getting to something, right? If you look at this, usually what an ID is a unique way to grab something from the DOM, okay? Or something that we can use in CSS to style something in a particular way. So I'm going to actually suggest that we try that. I'm going to try to grab the ID. And if you remember, to grab an ID with a CSS selector, it's the hashtag and then the ID name. So in this case, HP logo. And look at that, right? A little bit cut off by my head, but it's the same tag right there. You can see that we actually grabbed the same element. Now, I would argue that this is probably one of the better ways to grab this from the DOM in this particular case, because I would like to bet that someone actually coded this in, and it's probably not going to change unless some big things happen, unlike the class where that might change every single time this code changes. Okay, now I'd like you to think about these things as we're working through these DOM exercises, because it's going to get very important as we do our own attribute names, as well as actually try to look at how others build their websites. So really, the solution for this is pretty much any of these. All right, let's take a look at exercise 2, or 1, exercise 1. I don't know why I said 2. The second exercise after the warm-up. Now, I want you to go to another website. So I have it right here. This is one of my favorite websites. I use this to practice many different web development things. Wallhaven.cc/latest. Okay, so just pull it up in your browser and open up the DevTools, just like we did for Google. So I'm actually going to do that really quick first. So I'm going to search, I'm going to close this right here. I'm going to search for Wallhaven. And what you'll notice is that that's the first one right there. So the homepage looks like this. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I want to go to the latest one. So if you don't type it in manually, you can also just come to the homepage and then go to latest, and you'll get a page that looks kind of like this. So this is going to change depending on like what time you're doing this, and kind of course, this is the latest tab. So it's always going to be changing depending on when you actually do this. So you'll see different images than me. However, it looks like it's particularly fun right now of showing me really nice landscapes and some different bits of anime, which is really awesome. Great wallpaper website. Now I'd like to open my DevTools here as well. And there we go. I'm just going to switch to my console. And look at, oh my gosh, look at that. It's so cute. So we have a little welcome message from the developer team over at Wallhaven. If anybody opens the console, we have a little welcome to Wallhaven logging out for us in the console. So that's pretty awesome. Great. So I'm going to switch back to VS Code. Let's see what we got to do here. The goal is to use querySelector, just like we saw with Google example in the browser DevTools, which we have open, to select the first wallpaper images IMG tag, okay, from all of these images that are showing up on the page, all these image cards, I guess you can think of them showing up on the page, right? So to really specify what I mean, I want to grab this one. You can see where my mouse is kind of flailing around here in the top left. This is the first one in my example, and your example is going to be slightly different. I want you to grab the actual IMG tag that's defining this right here. Okay, the entire IMG tag itself. And then I want you to think of what's the best selector, just like we thought of with the Google example. All right, so go ahead and give that a shot, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, so let's go to our selector tool here, and I'm going to kind of look around here. It looks like these are all nice cards. So I'm going to click on the first one, and it opens up here in my Elements tab. Okay, so if I scroll around in here, what we can see is that technically all these seem to be in a UL, which is an unordered list. So that's kind of cool. They seem to put each of these as an LI, I'm guessing, right? So you can see that as I'm hovering through these, we're selecting the different LIs. So that's an interesting way to organize this. Inside each of these LIs, we have a figure. Okay, so this is a different way to kind of deal with images. So you can do some powerful things with figures. This is just an HTML element. If I open that up, inside of each figure, we have an IMG tag. And if I hover over that, we can see that this has the actual image inside of it. And then there's an A tag, which is the actual link when you click on that image. And then we also have, looks like some kind of div in here with a whole bunch of other information about that particular image. So our goal is to grab this tag right here, right? This particular one. Now, there are a few ways that you can kind of go about this, right? But let's try our strategy before of just trying to grab the first image on the page just to see what happens with that. So I'm going to go back to the console here and clear this out so I have some space. And I'm going to say document.querySelector, and I'm going to grab the first, I keep saying IMG tag, and I'm going to press enter. And okay, so that didn't seem to work. All right, I didn't grab this wallpaper's thumbnail right here. I grabbed, it looks like the logo of Wallhaven, which is in the top left. So that kind of makes sense, right? The first image on this entire page in this document is not our wallpaper picture, it's actually this logo. So that's not going to work. So we need another way to think about how to grab this wallpaper. So let's go back to our elements and think about this. Okay, so what is in here that we can probably use? Well, there's an alt tag that seems to be loading. I don't think that's going to be very useful because it sounds pretty generic. I'm going to assume that this didn't get updated for whatever reason from when I actually loaded the page. This should hopefully have an actual alt like description. Maybe it's missing a description. It's hard to really tell what they're doing with the alt here. Class, lazy load, and then loaded. Okay, so maybe we can look at this. So let's look for class lazy load. Let's see what that does. So if I do document.querySelector class lazy load, and if I do that, well, there you go. Lo and behold, I actually grab this image. So that's pretty cool. And just to confirm that really is that first image. So that seems to work. How about if we try the other class, loaded, lazy load, and then loaded? What if I just do dot loaded? And that seems to work too, right? So that's pretty cool. That seems to work pretty nicely. So we found at least 2 ways to do this. Let's come back here and see what else we can do. Well, there's data src. That's too specific. I mean, technically, since we know what it is in the DOM, we can probably grab this, but it's less kind of robust. If we didn't, we'd have to come in here and really look for each specific one. Same with the src. Well, what I'm going to try is just something slightly different, just to make this a little bit spicier for us. I'm going to try to get fancy with my CSS. I say fancy, but it's actually hopefully not too fancy because my CSS skills are definitely limited. I know, right, that this image tag, this img tag, is inside of a figure tag. Okay, so what if, my hypothesis, my kind of thinking is, maybe the other images on this page aren't inside a figure, right? So only these cards, only these wallpapers might be inside a figure tag. So let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to try to clear this console here. And I'm going to ask the question, can you grab me the first match for something that's a figure, right? And you can see that I get the entire figure here when I do that, right? So I'm just going to show you that if I get the entire figure, but I don't want the figure, I want the image. Right, so this is actually on the right track. So I can select a sub-component or sub-element within another element in CSS by kind of chaining these things together. So if I say, for example, figure img, now I'm saying this is going to be an image tag that's part of a figure tag, somewhere inside of a figure tag. All right, and lo and behold, look at that. That seems to work pretty awesome, right? So that is pretty nice. Now, technically, we can go even a little bit further because if we go to our Elements tab, we can see that an image tag is the direct child. And we're going to get to kind of navigation of the DOM and children and some parents and appending and prepending and before and after, all that kind of fun stuff shortly in future videos. But if I open up this figure, you'll see that there are kind of three direct children, right, of this figure. There's the img, there's the a tag, and then there's a div tag. So I can say that this image tag is a direct child, the first child, in fact, of this figure. So another way that we can ask this question is, instead of just saying anywhere inside of the figure there should be an image, I can say that a direct descendant of the figure should be an image, and that'll give us the same result. Now, what's the difference between these two? Well, this one is going to give us something where, oh my gosh, this preview always gets in the way. This one's saying if an image appears anywhere in a figure, give it to us, even if it's nested in there. And this one's saying, well, the image has to be the first kind of in the first layer of children of a figure. Okay. Now, this is probably the most specific in this case. Based on kind of what we're looking at. So I would probably prefer this. This one is not too bad either. And technically on this page, I'm pretty sure that it'll grab all the images if we were actually to change this to an all. But pretty much any of these answers works. There are other answers, and I'm sure you can get really creative with your CSS. You can start looking at the UL and the LI and the section, and you can even start to get really, really fancy with like trying to figure out like if it has a data source or things like that. But I'm just going to keep it simple just to show you that really, if you think about it top down and you start navigating the DOM, you can eventually kind of come up with one of these selectors. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much exercise 1. Let's take a look at exercise 2. Now, for this one, we're going to stick with Wallhaven again. And I want you to do pretty much step 2 in this case, right? Since we already kind of completed step 1. How would you get an array, okay, so a regular JavaScript array of all of the src attribute values for the wallpaper images on the page? So just to really clarify what this means, if I look at this img for this first card, for this first preview, you can see that it has an src attribute, which is this URL, which points to the URL for that image, right? A small version, a thumbnail of that image. Okay. What I'm asking is there a way for us to get a list of every single one on this page? Okay, so that's probably going to be a dozen or a couple dozen or however many it happens to be. Okay, I want a list of just these strings, just these URLs for all of the elements on the page in this wallpaper set. Okay, so just to really, really emphasize, when you do this correctly, you're just going to have a regular JavaScript array of strings, where each string is an src attribute value, like the first one I just pointed out, but it's going to change for every single one of these images. Now, just a hint here is be careful. A node list, which is what you get back from one of the querySelector APIs, is not the same as an array, but you can actually turn it into an array if you kind of Google for how to do that. It's actually quite quick. So have fun with this one. Definitely is going to tease your brain a little bit, and then let's go through it together. All right. So let's kind of see if we can actually get this going for the first one, and then we can kind of abstract that to do it for all of them. So if I come back to my console here, and I'm just going to go with this kind of selector that I had. Okay, you can see that I grabbed the IMG. All right, now I can ask for the attribute src. Now, just to show you what I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a console.dir, and I'm going to grab this and paste it in here. Okay, that query selector that I have, I'm going to do console.dir on it so that I can actually see all of the attributes inside of this. And again, we're going to get the attributes in future videos in depth, but for now, this should be pretty helpful. So I'm going to kind of scroll down through here. Now, again, this is a DOM HTML element node, and I'm going to be looking for the src. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, L, M, N, O, P, all the events, Q, R, S. There you go, right here. Right, you see that? So this is the src attribute, and then this is the value. Okay, so technically, we should be able to say, oops, I was trying to collapse the wrong thing here. I should be able to grab this, which is actually a DOM HTML element, specifically an image element, and I can do dot src to grab that src property off of it, right? So look at this. If I right click this and I open it in a new tab, what you'll see is that I do indeed get that thumbnail, right? Which is pretty awesome. So that actually works, which is pretty great. So this is just an object, right? We're getting back an actual HTML element object. Whenever it's displayed like this in the DevTools, this is just Chrome being helpful to us, or Firefox or what have you being helpful to us to show it kind of laid out, but to actually grab the actual kind of object notation version of it, console.dir usually helps to get that pretty easily. All right. Now, we know we can grab an src for each of these, but we need to grab all of them on the page. So how are we going to do that? So we know that we can do document.querySelector all to grab all of these, right? So I'm actually going to clear my console. I'm going to do this. And what we'll see is that I get back an array of 24 of these image tags, and they come back as a node list. Okay, and if I open up this list and I start kind of hovering through these, right, you'll see that I'm selecting each of these elements one at a time. If I scroll down on the page, you'll see that I'm highlighting more and more and more of these, right? So that's pretty cool. So it looks like it found 24 on this page. Okay. Now, what would be useful is we're trying to ask for each of these, can I grab just the src attribute? Now, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking of, okay, well, I could create a loop and I could do all that kind of stuff, but a map is technically what we want, right? We want to map through each of these, and we can pull out just the src and then put that into the result map. So technically, I should be able to do .map, right? And I can grab each element, and I'm going to grab the element.src. So I'm going to directly return the src of each of these elements. Now, if this syntax looks weird to you, I have a video on the channel that goes through how the array map syntax works in JavaScript, and this should help a little bit. In this case, I'm also using the shortened arrow function expression syntax in this case, where it's kind of eliminating the curly brackets and the brackets around the parameter. So if you haven't seen that before, I also have a video on that on the channel. But what we're asking here in this case is go through every single one of these elements that comes back, image elements, and for each of them, just give me the src and put that into a new array for us. So if I run that, oh my gosh, it doesn't work. I get a map is not a function. It's a little bit cut off by my head over here, but interesting. Okay, so this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier, right? A node list is actually not the same thing as an array. So I want to be able to take this and I want to turn it into an array so I can map over it. All right, so I'm going to come back to Google over here and I'm going to say node list to array. All right, and there's a whole bunch of articles on this. I guess technically MDN has one. You know, for fun, let's just look at Stack Overflow, the first result, like a true developer, and let's not copy and paste code. Fastest way to convert a node list to an array. Let's see the first answer. With ES6, we now have a simple way to do this. We can use the array from method. So we can say my array is array.from, and then we can pass it a node list. Interesting. Okay, so let's just quickly open up this array from. And it looks like in here, we just do array from, and then we give it the array-like thing, and it should turn it into an array. So an array-like, an iterable array-like objects to convert it into an array. And its return value is a new array. All right, so let's go back to our kind of code over here. And what I'm going to do is querySelector all. And I'm going to try to do an array.from of this thing. Okay, let's see what happens. If I pass this value, which is a node list, right, to this array from method, look at that, right? We actually get back pretty much what looks like the same thing, but in this case, now you can see at the very, very bottom, it's an array. It's no longer a node list. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? Now, what we can do is I'm just going to clear this out again. I'm going to say array from this, and I'm going to map over this, because now if this has been turned into an array, I can use .map. I'm going to grab each element, and I'm going to grab the elements.src. Now, fingers crossed this actually works. Let's see what we get. And oh my gosh, look at that, right? That is pretty awesome. So I'm just going to open this up just so it's a bit more clear. Now, this is not really legible because not only because my face is covering it, but because it's just a whole bunch of kind of random looking like words here at the end, I guess. But if we were to open these, right? For example, if I was to open this one right here and I right click on it and then I go to it will actually open that up. And look at that. That's a nice, beautiful image, just a thumbnail, which is why it's a bit blurry, of the second one on the page, which is the second one in the list. Now that's pretty awesome, right? Now look at this syntax. That's pretty beautiful, right? This is just to recap, asking the question, grab me everything that matches figure image on the page, turn it into an array instead of a node list, and then map over it, because we can map over arrays, and pull out the src attribute for each of those elements and put it in that new array, which is what map does. And then that's how we have a list of strings, because an src for each element is just a string. Okay, really, really powerful stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Super awesome. Okay, now, I hope you got that one. If not, don't worry, that was definitely tricky. It required a bit of Googling around to get it to work. But now hopefully you've seen the example and you can use that in future videos as well. So let's take a look at exercise 3. All right. So for this last one, I want you to again use Wallhaven. It's just a very visual site. It's a lot of fun to use it, and we're going to be using it in the future as well. But the question I want you to ask this time is, how would you get an array of all of the href attribute values for all of the top navigation links, including the more submenu? Now, this is a very confusing sentence, so I'm just going to kind of explain this visually before I let you off to try this out yourself. So if we, I'm going to actually close this really quick because I'm too zoomed in here. So I'm going to zoom out a tiny bit. You can see up here, it was switching to a mobile mode. But if you see up here in the desktop mode, right, we have this kind of set of navigation links. Okay, and if you hover over each of them, in the very bottom left of your screen, it might be a bit small for you to see on my screen, but if you check it out, you'll be able to see it a bit more clearly. It's still maybe a bit small. Is the actual URL that it links to, right? And the same is true for these ones in the More tab as well. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is write a query selector that will grab all of these links in this nav menu, including all of these ones here in the More. Okay, so there's, I think, like a dozen of them in total or something like that, right? Maybe just over, right? So for example, wallhaven.cc/latest, which is where we are right now, and then /hot/top list, etc. That should be an array of strings with all of those hrefs in there, just so that we can see what the different nav links are. Okay, definitely quite tricky, but give that a shot and see how far you can get with it. Okay, let's try it out ourselves. Let's take a look at the hints really quick. So node list is not an array, so we kind of solved that with the array from. And just another hint here was that you can use querySelector on any element. This means you can keep narrowing down our queries, right? So if we have an element, we can querySelector on that element to search its subtree, and then we can querySelector further on that subtree to grab all the elements in there if we need to. Okay, so because we're getting back elements from querySelector, that inherits from element, HTML element, and node. So those all have querySelector available to them. And if we querySelector on the document, we're querySelectoring on the entire page. But if we querySelector on a specific element, we're only querySelecting within that element's subtree. Okay. Now, if I go back to Chrome here, I'll open up my tools, my dev tools. And I'm going to leave this a bit zoomed out. Actually, I guess maybe I can still zoom in. No, I'll leave this a bit zoomed out here. And I'll go to my Elements tab, and I'm going to select these links right here. Okay, now if we scroll through this, let's see what we can find. So if I highlight over these, the nice thing is that I actually get kind of a nice visual of what we're actually looking for. So in this case, it looks like there's this entire header, which is everything up top, and inside the header, there's like this form over here. There's like a panel for like logging in. There's this top menu thing, and then there's the logo. Okay, so clearly we want to go in here, right? So I'm going to open this, and it looks like we have a couple of things in here. So maybe we need both of these. Not sure yet. Let's take a look. And if I open up this div or this nav, sorry, if I kind of okay. So we have a UL in here that seems to cover pretty much all of these elements. And then I have a div here. I'm not really sure what that is. Let's open up this UL first. It looks like, okay, so in this UL, I have all these LIs. Look at that. I'm selecting all these. That's pretty great. And inside each of these, there's the actual link. So that's great. So we know where these are. So that's good. We can see that these have an href attribute, right? Because they're anchor tags. So that's fantastic. So it looks like it stops at this like the messaging looking one. What are they calling that one? The forums. But we need everything inside of this more tab as well. So let's see if those are maybe in this one. So if I open up this one, okay, top menu, secondary, social is what they're giving these classes. So if I open this up, wow, look at that. A lot of LIs in here. Cool. So if I open that up, we have untagged. That seems interesting. Tags, rules. Okay, so, maybe, yeah, look at that. So when I have the menu open, that's what's actually being selected. That's why it looked a bit weird when I didn't have the menu actually uncollapsed. These are actually the elements that we want. And in fact, even these ones down here, right, are the social ones. So we have, I'm assuming, our email here, contact, we have a Twitter, we have our IRC, oh, good times, and then we have our Discord, right? So that's pretty great. So that works pretty well. So it looks like everything we need is kind of in this nav. All right, so let's start with that. I'm going to do a document.querySelector, and I'm going to try to grab the nav and hopefully get that element. And it looks like it works, right? So I grab that nav element, and then both of those things are actually in there. Okay, so now what I want to do is try to grab what, right? I want all the hrefs. So hrefs are part of, in this case, the anchor tags, right? So if I open each of these up, it looks like there's anchor tags that have an href in here. And if I open these divs up, similarly, there's anchor tags in there, and then there's anchor tags in here as well. So what I'm really asking for is within this nav node, or within this nav element, right? I want to grab all of the nested A tags, but I want to grab their hrefs. So let's see if we can start with that first one, right? I'm going to ask inside of this nav, so restrict to this subtree of just the nav, give me all of the anchor tags. So let's see how we would do that. So I'm going to say document.querySelector nav, which is going to give me that element. Then I can do .querySelector all, which is going to select all of the elements in a node list. And I can grab a selector in here. So I'm going to say I'm interested in all the A tags. Okay, so if I do that, I get a list of 18 items. Now that's pretty cool, right? Now let me open this up. Let's look through these. We have latest, hot, top list, random, upload, forums. All right. Then we have these ones over here. Okay, it looks like they're missing their names. But if I open up one of these, for example, if I open up the latest node, and if I scroll through here, I should be able to find A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, href. Look at that, right? Right there, href, right? That's the latest one, which is the first one right here, which is this little clock looking one, I guess. Okay, so that looks to be the latest one. So if I open up one of these down here, and if I look at the href over there, it looks like the href for this one is untagged. Okay, which I'm assuming is the one that says few tags. And maybe I'll look at one more in here. Maybe I'll scroll down over here to number 12. And if I scroll down to the href, we have stats, right? And you can see that that's this one right here. So that's pretty awesome. Looks like that's actually working. And it looks like we have 18 links in total, which seems to work. So if I open up the last one, just to make sure, href, we have Discord, which is the link for the Discord, which is fantastic, right? So this query right here is saying, grab the nav, and then on just that subtree, just that HTML element subtree, right, which is a nav HTML element, grab all of the nested A tags, regardless of how nested they are inside of there, right? It doesn't have to be the first child, just anywhere in that tree, grab all of the A tags. Okay, and then give it to us back in a node list. So now we have a node list. Okay, so just to confirm, I'm going to rerun this up there just so we can see that. And what we want to do is grab all the hrefs. So we want to map over this, right, and pull out all of the hrefs. So I'm going to do my trick that we just learned. We're going to say array.from of this. And if we do that, it looks like, see now, this is now an array. It is no longer a node list, right? And I can do .map on this, where I'm going to grab each A tag. And for each A tag, I'm going to grab a.href. All right. And there we go, right? Isn't that totally awesome? Right? If I expand this, you can see that we have kind of all of these different hrefs on there for all of our different links. Now, that is totally awesome. I don't know about you, like even just doing this multiple times, every single time I do it, it just kind of blows my mind how fun this is. Like genuinely, like sometimes I like going through these DOMs for different pages and just kind of looking at the structure and kind of poking around in there and seeing like what we can select and all that kind of stuff. When we get to things like web scraping, where we can kind of write a program that will do this automatically for us, go to a website and kind of look around on there, which is actually how the search engines work, like Google and things like that. They write programs that actually kind of do this, right? They go to web pages and they grab all the things on there and they try to kind of index it or make some sense of it and kind of put it into a big database so that we can all search it nicely. Right? So this is kind of the precursor to that kind of stuff. If we can find our way around a web page and the DOM and how it's structured and actually pull things out of it and be very specific with how we do that, and actually even pull out images, pull out all their source attributes, pull out all the hrefs and follow those links and keep going further and further into the site automatically, you can do a lot of really, really powerful things with that. So I hope you found these exercises valuable. If you did, I'd love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. What we're going to do in the next set of exercises is go through actually how to navigate the DOM. So this is going to be quite a large topic because you've been probably thinking like, oh, we're already navigating the DOM. But I'd like to kind of go through topics like the parent-child relationship, what the children and child nodes are, what it means to be kind of the first or the last child or first or last element on a page or within a subtree. Because once we start understanding this hierarchy and really kind of getting into the terminology and the nuances of what's the difference between a node and an element and the first and the last and kind of the list of children and all that kind of stuff, all of this really helps build out a really solid understanding and base for when we actually want to build our own DOMs from scratch. So I can't wait to get to that video. I'll see you there. See you later.